You're watching HCAM TV.
Hello, welcome to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. We are here talking about Hopkinton and talking about everything that's going on in this crazy pandemic time. And it's Tuesday. I'm happy to say that we have been able to secure the superintendent of our school systems, Dr. Cavanaugh, for a series of 5 Hangout Hour episodes on Tuesday, where she will be talking about some of the critical decisions that she and the reopening team and the school district are working on. And I would like to thank you. We have been getting a lot of questions. We've been getting a lot of interest, and I really, really do value that. And I think it's tremendous that Hopkinton is able to connect with us and this vital information. Before I welcome Dr. Cavanaugh onto the show, I would just like to make a statement that in my working with her and talking about these issues, you may know I teach one class up at the high school, so I get a whole bunch of emails about that too. I have been extremely impressed with the thoughtfulness and the depth at which this school system and our town is taking these issues. If you do not know, my wife is a doctor and is very plugged in to the latest and greatest information that's coming on this. And one other plug I would give you is for the Carol Dykema daily updates. It has a lot of great information that you can use to help understand what is happening in this pandemic, what Massachusetts is doing, and the way things are going. And with that knowledge, the things that the school district and the Board of Health are considering are very, very thorough. And I know that there are some very scary things that are coming up. How school is run, how businesses open, and we don't have all the answers yet, but I do encourage you to listen to what our leaders are saying because they have a lot of knowledge behind them. And that's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to welcome our superintendent onto our show. Hi.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for having me again. I really appreciate that HCAM is able to provide this forum for us so that we are able to get information out to the public. I think that that's the most important thing that we can do at this point in time.
I agree. There are so many things that are going on. There's so many moving parts. I would like to just frame our discussion for today. We talked about having some topics that we're starting off with, and our general topic for today will be health and safety. PPE, physical distancing, cleaning protocols, and shutdown protocols. Now, we've got a bunch of questions that have come in that we'll be sharing and talking about. Before we get to any of that, would you like to make a statement and tell us where things are standing for your perspective on these issues?
Surely. So the first thing that I will say is this morning, everyone in the Hopkinton school community did receive an email, and the email does say that we are going to be asking parents to make their choice for September. We are calling that a binding decision. And we're really calling it a binding decision because we need for people to make that choice so that we can start the scheduling process. It makes a huge difference to us whether we have 15 students or 30 students, for example, in the second grade who want to attend remotely, or if we have 5 students in the high school, say, for example, who need AP chemistry taught remotely. So, it's very important now that parents start to make these decisions for scheduling. We are considering doing a grace period at the start of school. So I want people to know that there will be opportunities, dates on which you can change from one model to another, but we can't just have people sort of flip-flopping nonstop because that won't help us with scheduling. So I did want to explain that, Jim, before we get started. And then I am happy to answer all kinds of questions about PPE and hand washing and all of those things. If parents have not seen the Commissioner of Education's guidance on these things, I think that they should probably take a look at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website. That document is very helpful to parents, I believe. And one thing that I'll start with is that we are, as a district, have decided to be a 6-foot social distancing district. So I know that the commissioner had said that a minimum of 3 feet would be required, but we are committed in the classroom to ensuring that our students have 6 feet of social distancing at all times, which is why we are looking at that hybrid model.
Okay. Several of our questions do concern this binding decision. And you mentioned that there are dates, opportunities for switching. Did you say specifically what they are, or what kind of time frame are you considering?
So and this is another interesting point, the Commissioner of Education has negotiated with the Massachusetts Teachers Association a reduction of required school days for children, not for the adults in our buildings. So typically what would happen is the kids would attend 180 days. Next year, students will be required to attend only 170 days. That puts the start date for school this year somewhere closer to the 15th or 16th of September. So I think that that's one of the things that would be important for people to know. So relative to what we're calling the binding decision, the decision that you make in the next week, and on Thursday morning, I will be sending out a 20-page document that explains everything that I think parents will need to know to be well informed to make that decision. And on Thursday evening, there's a public forum sponsored by the school committee. That will be starting at 7 o'clock on HCAM TV. And so people can see that there as well. But relative to the binding decision, when we start on the 15th, the goal is probably to have about 2 weeks where parents are trying out the choice that they've made. So around about October 1st, if people would like to make that change, they can certainly do so. And then we'll kind of, follow the trajectory of the virus and choose additional dates. It would probably be, say, monthly or every 6 weeks that people would be able to make that switch. And I guess it all depends on the demand for those kinds of switches. If we have, 5 kids changing daily, it will be absolute chaos in the schools. And I know it doesn't feel like that, but what that would really translate to, would be more like 100 kids a month. And if we're going to do that, it seems like it would be better to do it all on one day rather than flip-flopping every other day. So.
Okay. You know what? I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the committee and the conversation that you've been having, but quite honestly, we're getting a lot of questions, and I think I'd like to respect the people who are taking the time and sending these in. So if you're ready, I'd like to jump into some of these questions.
I am ready, and I hope that I will have answers to all of them.
Well, the first one you've already answered. It was from Catherine. She was wondering about the start date, so you just covered that. The one I'd like to start off with, this came in yesterday after we had the pre-recorded segment with you and the Board of Health Director and the head nurse from HPS, which was a great segment. And we played that for the first time, and we're also playing it on HCAM Ed. And here's a person, Tom, who wrote, "Thank you all very much for today's broadcast related to opening schools safely. We are a new family to Hopkinton. Welcome. And the school system was a large part of our selection to choose Hopkinton as our forever town. We truly are looking forward to beginning our future here, even though the first year may look a little different." One follow-up question we had after watching pieces of today's broadcast is related to the hybrid or home learning approach for this academic year. Can you confirm that this school year will be conducted entirely in school? We have a first grader, and the harsh reality for many families, including ours, is that needing to be home to assist our child may put one of us parents out of work completely, which is an understandably devastating forecast for us. We are hoping that the measures that were discussed today will be executed well and will allow for children to remain safely in school. And the reason I want to start off with that, Carol, is obviously what the school system is able or has to do has a tremendous effect on families in our community and on people's working lives. So if you could speak to how you are taking that information into consideration and any knowledge you have about that.
Sure. The only way for us to ensure the 6 feet of social distancing, which through surveys and the reentry advisory group and conversations with parents felt to me to be of paramount concern to the community, was to create a hybrid model. We simply do not have the classroom space to bring in kids if we are going with the 3-foot model. We just but we would have the space for the 3-foot model. We would not have a space for 6 feet. So that's why we went with the hybrid model. And then we thought about the different types of hybrid models. So there are some that put kids in school Monday and Tuesday. Everybody learns remotely on Wednesday, and then the rest of the kids come in on Thursday and Friday. That one felt challenging because when you leave school on Tuesday, you're not coming back again till the following Monday. So that felt like a really big break without teacher face time. The same would be true for week in, week out. So we went with an every other day model. It gets kids into school 50% of the time. Now, I understand what that caller is asking. That caller is wondering, if you choose that hybrid model, will that be in existence for the entire school year? And what I would say is that would only change if the coronavirus trajectory changed in Hopkinton and we were required to shut down either a school building or the entire district, or if it changed significantly in Massachusetts and the governor again put us back into a shutdown. The other thing that could happen is if the virus moves in a different direction and we are told statewide that we would be able to safely open our schools, 5 days a week, full on learning, then we would certainly follow that too. Otherwise, it would be our intention to keep this hybrid model in place throughout the school year.
And I just want to be clear, has that decision been made? Are we beginning the school year in a hybrid model?
Well, families will also have the opportunity to choose remote. So you can either do remote learning, and we will be pushing out instruction remotely 5 days a week as if it were almost kind of a regular school day. Obviously we can't have kids sitting in front of screens for 6.5 hours, but it'll be developmentally appropriate. And I know that the parents felt last time in the spring that 1 hour of synchronous learning, kind of face to face with the teacher, wasn't enough. So we are working on improving those time amounts for the teachers who are working remotely. And then the other group of people can choose that hybrid model. So yes, we are very much committed to a hybrid model now. And what we like about the every other day model is it ensures that kind of continuity where every other day kids are getting a typical school day, albeit with mask breaks and hand washing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, this person also had a very long question, and a lot of the things had start dates, and you touched upon that. This one I'm not sure about. Is the school system working with Kidsborough? And if so, are we hybrid or remote? Will there be daycare or after school in the school buildings?
So that's a wonderful question. We have a contract with Kidsborough, and Kidsborough does provide our before and after care, and we will be maintaining that contract. So if you have a contract with Kidsborough in any one of our 3 elementary schools, Elmwood, Marathon, or Hopkins, you still have your child care. If you're worried about the every other day, we have reached out not only to Kidsborough, but also to the YMCA. And both of those organizations are able to take kids on the off days full time. They are both aware that kids are going to need assistance with the remote instruction. And so I'm feeling very good about those kinds of full day care opportunities. They absolutely assured me that even if we are in an every other day model, they are perfectly happy taking families on the every other day basis.
Okay. You had talked earlier about symptomatic staff and students, and a person had a question, and I'm just going to ask a question. If you could kind of give a robust answer for the procedures about symptomatic people. If a student or school worker has nondescript symptoms like a fever, will they need to quarantine and be tested for COVID before returning to school?
So if we have a person who, and I can't say this enough, who is feeling unwell, has a couple of those COVID symptoms, maybe they have a sore throat, they're feeling a little down. I would encourage that person to just please stay home, whether it's a student or a teacher. And if it's a student, we can certainly get the work out to you as if it would be, as if you typically had the common cold in the wintertime. So that will be taken care of. But we really, really do not want anyone coming into our schools ill. Now, that said, we understand that people, during the process of the regular school day will often start to feel unwell. And if they are exhibiting COVID symptoms, we have what's called sort of that isolation room. We have a COVID room. It's designated and it's required by the department in every single one of our schools. So what will happen is that person will report to the COVID room, whether it's an adult or a child. And our nurses have full medical PPE. They've all been outfitted for them. I mean, if you see how they look in this medical, get up, they look exactly like hospital wear. It's pretty amazing what they have, the N95 mask and all. And so they will ensure that a parent is immediately contacted and that child is safely sort of brought out to a car to meet his parents. We won't be inviting the parent into the school for fear that the parent may also, be COVID positive. I know people are asking, will the schools be doing testing? No, the schools will not be doing testing. That is really left up to medical professionals. So, people can certainly report to any one of those kind of drive-through clinics, area hospitals. You'd call your pediatrician or you'd call your primary care doctor and get directions from them.
Follow up with that on Thursday when we have Sean, the director of the Board of Health, on, because I was talking about this and I think it would be really interesting for some schools to do a lot of testing, because if this turns into an issue where schools become a super spreader event, wouldn't it be good knowledge to have, and how it started and how it went, and what is done to mitigate that? So perhaps maybe the town could do something like that.
I mean, some of the things that we are hearing is that there will be rapid and inexpensive saliva testing before the end of the year. I'm obviously not a medical professional, but I can certainly say that if that does become available, it would certainly be a game changer for the public schools.
Right. Okay. We're going to move on. Meredith has sent a question. Could you please address what the 100% virtual remote learning program will look like? If we are comparing to options versus virtual versus hybrid, it would be very helpful to know what we are actually comparing. Is it run by the district, run by Hopkinton teachers? Is the curriculum the same as those going to in-person hybrid school?
So, and I know that I've said this many times, and I will continue to say that if you are a person who chooses remote instruction, it will be our goal, our commitment to get you the best possible remote instruction that we can. We are in negotiations with the Teachers Association to determine how many hours of synchronous in-person instruction a teacher teaching remotely would deliver in a day. So I will have that information for people, in coming days. And I don't want anyone to make a decision until I have that information very specifically for you. But what I can say is this: there are some matches that are perfect and there are some matches that are imperfect. So for example, if we had 20 second graders who needed remote instruction and one second grade teacher who was going to be delivering that remote instruction, because that person also had some kind of medical issue that put them into that position, it would be wonderful. It's a match made in heaven that way. But we could also have places where there isn't that kind of match made in heaven. So say there's not that second grade teacher, but there is a fourth grade teacher. A fourth grade teacher could conceivably be assigned to a second grade classroom or cohort, right? We could also have issues with some of the singleton classes, say, for example, at the high school. In the event that we had a student who wanted to take, or 3 or 4 students who were being taught remotely but wanted AP Bio. AP Bio is such a popular and really filled course at the high school that we wouldn't be able to pull our AP Bio teacher and have them teach a section of 4 kids remotely. So we would have to think hard about what that would look like. And truthfully, at the high school level, that could mean that you are taking an online course. It could happen through a program called Edmentum. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is talking about creating an online learning platform. We have VHS courses in our high school, so I would not want to say to you that what you're going to get is exactly what the students who are in person are getting, but we are committed truly to trying to give you the very best possible education, and wherever possible, provided by Hopkinton Public Schools educators.
Okay, so our program's getting a little bit hijacked from the initial thing, but I can see by the questions coming in that this, parents have to make this decision pretty quickly, and they're very interesting. So I'm going to read a couple more questions that are just as a group that are along the same lines, and if you think there's anything more that you want to add to that.
Okay.
Catherine asked, what is the hybrid system looking like? Is it going to be the same days every week or changing every week? Catherine asked, is Hopkinton designing a plan that is seamless between distance, hybrid, and in-person so that they can quickly move from one to another? Don asked, will the full-time remote learners have access to the same teachers and the same curriculum as the in-person learners?
So I will do the second question because we, just like every other district in Massachusetts, we have to have 3 different plans so that we can sort of pivot on a dime. Right now, we're offering 2 of those plans. We're not offering that, full-time in-person education. I'm not sure, Jim, if there was one part of that question that I might have missed there. But yes, I do think that the transition between them would be absolutely seamless if we had to. I know one of the questions people have asked around that seamlessness is, so what happens if in a 4th grade classroom, for example, we have a student who tests positive for COVID-19? At that moment, what would happen is that particular classroom would be shut down and that classroom would revert to remote instruction for the entire group and for the teacher in that classroom, assuming that everyone was feeling well enough to attend remote instruction. And that really isn't something that's just coming from the Hopkinton Public Schools. That is coming from the state of Massachusetts Commissioner of Education. And that's how we would know. The other thing that would happen at that point in time is we would reach out to Sean McAuliffe, Casey Morrow, and we would start all of that contact tracing so that anyone who had actually been in very close contact with that student in the same classroom, on the same school bus, for example, someone will reach out to you and let you know that you may either want to quarantine, depending on what the Department of Public Health decides. That's not my decision to make. Or you may need to get tested. And again, that would be through the DPH, not through the public schools.
Okay. Whew, deep breath. You're doing great.
Let me know if I've missed any of those questions. Sometimes
Okay.
it's hard to keep all 3 in there.
All right. Sophia asked, what is the stance from the teachers and teachers unions from Hopkinton?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think we have just under 350 teachers in the Hopkinton Public Schools. Right now, we are in what I would consider to be very good faith negotiations with the Teachers Association. They have shared with the district their concerns about coming back to school, and we have shared with them some of the things that we would be asking them to do through the process. We also have a human resources department that's working very closely with the Hopkinton teachers to ensure that people who have particular needs as far as coming back goes, those needs would be met.
Okay. Jessica asked, and she's talking about the decision for hybrid model or full remote learning. Will this be a child by child decision or a by family decision?
That is a wonderful question. What we're going to do is have green days and orange days. So a kid will get assigned to either one of them. And you'll either go, so this I think question was asked the last time, you'll either go Monday, Wednesday, Friday the first week, Tuesday, Thursday the next week, or you'll go, on the off cycle. What we're trying to do is to ensure that every single kid in a particular family either goes on the green day or on the orange day. Now, if you're a family who says, you know what, I have a daughter who would love to be, the in-person hybrid model, but I have a son who might prefer remote learning, or I have a 7th grader and I have a 4th grader, you can absolutely choose 2 different models for your kids. That is not a problem whatsoever. So if you want to be one of those families that has 1 kid hybrid and 2 kids remote, no problem.
Okay. Rachel asks, will elementary age kids who choose the remote learning option be taught by Hopkinton teachers?
That is the goal. Yes. Yeah. And I think that we should probably be able to honor that. I mean, it would be an odd situation, I think, if we couldn't do that. One thing that is a little bit of a worry to us, if you are a Hopkinton Public School teacher who is a parent and you are really struggling to find childcare, those folks can take leaves through FMLA. And if that happens, you may end up with a substitute teacher.
Okay. Again, people are several questions on what happens if we want to move from remote back to hybrid, and asking again if Hopkins teachers delivering the remote learning material. A lot of people are interested in that. Could you just quickly touch upon again what you think the rate is between people being able to switch from remote back to hybrid.
Yeah, I will say that I think so. Once you make this decision, you're kind of locked into it for the first couple of weeks of school. We really just need to get schedules written and kids into classrooms so that, and because we're splitting classrooms to Orange Day, Green Day. So, for example, let's imagine I'm a third grade teacher and 10 of my kids come on Monday and 11 of my kiddos come on Tuesday. I have to know who's coming to school when. So you're kind of locked into that for the first couple of weeks of school. But after that, there will be dates on which you can make those switches back and forth. And I know that there might be a lot of people who are looking at, what's the trajectory of the virus? How safe will my child be? Maybe you want to see how it plays out for the first month. Are kids getting sick, or does it feel like we are up and running and doing well? Not that I can predict anything. I don't have a crystal ball, but one of the things that we have seen as sort of a test case is that the YMCA camp, the ESY program that we have, which is our own summer school here in Hopkinton, and Parks and Rec are all running summer programs. And honestly, knock on wood, as Sean McAuliffe said in the presentation we did the other day, we have not had a counselor, a teacher, a student yet test positive for COVID. So that's heartening. That's heartening data.
Yes, that is. Here's a different one. Chelsea asks, would withdrawing from HPS for the year with the intent to homeschool negatively affect the budget or funding for HPS for the 2021-22 school year?
So for the 2021 school year, it will not negatively affect the budget for the Hopkinton Public Schools. If a family does want to homeschool, and I understand that there will be some who do, there's an online form that you can take a look at, and then that form is, filled out with all of your curricular plans, and it's submitted to Jennifer Parson, who's the assistant superintendent in the Hopkinton Public Schools. And I'll just talk a little bit about funding. So Chapter 70 money is predicated on the number of students in our schools. This year, for example, we got a nice bump in Chapter 70 money because it was coming through the legislature that way, but also because we just have so many kids in the Hopkinton Public Schools. In the event that 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 or 50 kids leave us, we're not going to sort of feel that difference. But if 500 students left us, we would certainly feel that difference. And that would not be until the 21-22 school year, budgetarily.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Samta asks, how many hours will a typical day in the remote option be?
So, and I guess that question is probably best answered on a by building case, because, if you're a first grade student and we sign all the kids into morning meeting and then we have an ELA lesson, we'd probably have like a little bit of a break, and then we might do a math lesson and a social studies lesson and then another little bit of a break and provide a related arts lesson in the afternoon. So it could span over that 6.5 hour kind of traditional school day, but you wouldn't be kind of on all the time. At the high school level, you would probably have many more hours where you were on, and certainly I think more hours on than you were last spring.
Right, okay. Here's one by email. Will you be having the reopening committee and staff spend a day in the school following the guidelines that will have to be followed daily to get an idea of what they will have to deal with? Ashland did this, and it was suggested by a school committee member that it be done here.
We have that scheduled actually for Thursday morning of this week at 9 o'clock. And what we're planning to do is to, have folks go in and sit in the buses and see what it looks like when you have, buses, one person in each seat. And if we do that, it's going to give you a sense of how physically close you technically are to another person. And what I really like about this is that we have purchased for every student in the Hopkinton Public Schools, not just masks, but also plexiglass face shields. So we are going to ask our students who are riding on the buses to wear not just the mask, but also the face shields. So we're going to sit in those buses and try on our masks and try on our face shields. And we are asking the volunteers who are doing this to come, sort of backpack in hand. So you're going to get a sense of what it feels like to lug your backpack on, even though you're wearing a mask and you're wearing a face shield and it's really hot outside. Then we're going to proceed into 2 different high school classrooms. In the first one, they will sit through a lesson on why reading is so hard, and we'll talk about strategies to help kids read, and that will sort of be the model secondary lesson. And then we'll take a mask break, and then we're going to move into an elementary lesson, and we'll have a lesson on morning meeting. Like, what does a morning meeting look like when we're not sitting in a circle at the rug anymore, but rather we're all sitting in desks, all facing the same way, socially distanced at 6.5 feet. So they'll be able to try an elementary model, a secondary model, the school bus, and and everybody will be lugging their backpacks, so we have a sense of what it also looks like when no one is using lockers or cubbies or those kinds of things. So yes, we are going to do that.
Okay, great. Catherine asked us, are the students, if positive, allowed back without a double negative test, which is the protocol followed in hospitals before they clear someone of being infectious? So be interested, you can just kind of talk about if someone becomes positive, what happens next?
Mhm. What the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is asking us to do is after testing positive, you would have to have a 10-day time out of school as well. And that's the entire cohort. That entire classroom would be out for 10 days. I know people are thinking, but wait, I've heard 14. But really, from the time that you've tested, you probably contracted the virus 4, 5, 6 days earlier. So it's 10 days out. And we have to remember, too, that when we're talking about those 10 days, we have weekends built in and a negative test for that particular student. I also want to make sure that people know that we cannot compel people to test. We cannot do that. So the 10 days and being without a fever for 3 days and all of those things will certainly be in place. But no, I can't compel people to test, but those are the rules that we are 10 days out and hopefully a negative test. I would imagine that people would want to take the negative test to ensure that they are much better.
Right. So you cannot compel people to test. I understand that. So could you just kind of, how does a student get identified for having quarantine for 10 days?
Well, we would know that that person, well, we don't know that the student has technically quarantined for 10 days. And we, as a school department, we don't enforce quarantining or isolation, right? All of that comes through the Department of Public Health. Even things like, the new mandate that you quarantine when you come back into Massachusetts having traveled, and, there's obviously a $500 fine. But I believe that the person who is responsible for that, again, is the director of your local public health department.
Okay. So I'm just a little unclear. As we go through the school year, if a student became infected and had this virus,
Mhm.
how would we find out about that?
That's a great question. So let's imagine that let's go back to my 4th grade classroom, and we have a student who is sent home. He's been in the isolation room at school. The school nurse has sent the child home. The school nurse has said to the mom, you really should call your pediatrician and get your child tested, and she does. And so now we know that we have a positive student in that classroom. We immediately alert everybody in that classroom and the teacher that there has been somebody, and I shouldn't say we do that, because the DPH will immediately alert people that someone has tested positive in that classroom, and that they will begin remote instruction the following day. And through contact tracing, we will know also, because kids will have an assigned seat in the bus. So if that child sits in, the 3rd seat behind the driver, we can take a look at how many kids were within 6 feet of that student, how many kids were within 8 feet of the student, 10 feet, nowhere near that student, but we can always let people know that is what has happened on the bus.
Okay. All right. Maddox asked the question, and perhaps this might be the first time we hear it because I haven't heard your comments yet. Can you please shed more light on your comments pertaining to those with IEPs and fully in-person options?
Yes. So the Commissioner of Education has asked Massachusetts public schools to implement what he is calling gap closing measures. So any student in the Hopkinton Public Schools who is on an individualized education plan, any student who is identified as an English learner, and any student who has I guess, been identified as a student who is operating below grade level or struggling student, those students will be sort of reviewed by the school department, and they will be, invited by the directors of those departments, either the director of student services, the director of English learner acquisition, and you'll get a survey that will ask you if you do in fact want your child to come every day. We can't, again, compel people to come every day if they would prefer to use the hybrid model where you're in school one day and remote the next. But we will certainly be inviting those children in every single day as a gap closing measure. We feel like kind of getting that double dose will enable those kids to be more successful and to, just better access our curricula.
Okay, good. Yeah, you mentioned busing at one point. We have a question from Amy concerning buses. When will we know more about busing? As someone working full-time with no option for remote work, I am also not able to transport my child without busing. So this is important.
Yes, we had put out a survey and we asked parents if they would be able to come up with some form of transportation other than the big yellow school bus. And in that survey, 50% of the parents said yes, they would. And there were a variety of responses. I can drive them. My student has a parking pass. My child is a walker. Those kinds of things. So, given the fact that 50% of the students in Hopkinton would be able to provide their own transportation, that sort of leaves us with that other 50%, and we're really only inviting to school each day 50% of 50%. So it's about a quarter of the kids who would need that kind of transportation. So if I'm thinking about, that kind of quarter of a kid every day, on a daily basis, what we're really talking about is, maybe, I don't know, like 1,000 students, but let's get crazy and say that we're talking about 1,200 kids, and we put those students on, 31 school buses. We'd have to kind of work a little bit through that, because I think that we can only put 26 on a bus, but we're very close at this point in time. If we had 1,000 kids and let me do my math here, and we divided by our 31. There we go. Yeah, we're talking about 32 kids. And so, it would be interesting to see. And I also think that we will have a little bit of leeway, because when a parent says, yes, I can do that, we have multiple kids and families and that sort of thing. I think we're going to be okay with transportation. I've gone a long way to say.
Okay, great. There are a few questions concerning how will safety be addressed with nurse, guidance office visits, bathroom breaks, the rules to clean between classes. Also, how is lunch eaten? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've been doing with all of our building principals is coming up with schedules and protocols that identify all of these things. So when kids get to school, what they are supposed to do is immediately either wash their hands or use hand sanitizer. At the Marathon School and the Elmwood School, there are actually sinks and soap and paper towels in every single classroom. So it will be a whole lot easier to sort of do that there. There's hand sanitizing stations in all of the classrooms at Hopkins Middle School, high school. They are all over our schools right now, because we want kids using that hand sanitizer. And the hand sanitizer that we have purchased is 70%, alcohol. So it's the high quality hand sanitizer that we know will kill germs in the absence of good hand washing. We want kids to wash their hands before they eat lunch, after they eat lunch, when they move from one place to another, before we dismiss them. We're going to spend an awful lot of time washing our hands. And I know that as teachers and parents hear that, you might be thinking, my gosh, that's an awful lot of time of not learning. But I think that keeping our children safe is absolutely the most important thing that we can do. So all of our kids, K to 12, are going to be pre-K to 12, are going to be wearing masks. We're going to be a pre-K to 12 school district. I know the commissioner has suggested that grades 2 and up, that's not something that we are interested in. We're taking as many precautions as we can, while also getting kids back into school to give them, really good instruction. In terms of other PPE, kids are certainly welcome to wear their face shields anytime they want. If we're thinking about things like, what does it look like when kids are getting, one-to-one testing, or they're meeting with a guidance counselor? Again, in those situations, they will certainly wear their masks. They can wear the plexiglass face shield if they like, but we have bought plexiglass screens for all of those, places. So they just fit right on everybody's desktop. And that will keep, that amount of space. We had a consultant come in and look at all of our spaces. So in our guidance counselors' offices, for example, we're removing extraneous furniture. So where the guidance counselor sits and where the student sits, there should still be 6 feet of separation in the plexiglass and the face shield and the mask. So all of those things can be in place so that we can safely run all of the programming that we would typically run. Bathroom cleaning, I know people are very much interested in. We will have someone who is going into that bathroom and cleaning at very regular intervals, doing all of the touch points, and every bathroom will be fully sanitized every night, as will every classroom. We've bought those electrostatic sprayers that will go in. You can do a classroom in just a matter of minutes. It's a chlorine-based product. It leaves no residue. It's no harm to human beings, but it does do a very nice job of, cleaning all of our surfaces. I know when Sean was on, he had suggested that things like paper are not nearly as problematic as the hard surfaces. So we'll be making sure that we are wiping those down throughout the day. Lunch will absolutely happen with 6 feet of social distancing. I know kids will be taking their masks off to eat. So we're going to try to reduce the number of students in classrooms when that's possible and perhaps use outdoor or cafeteria space. We will still do things like have recess and physical education, all within the constraints of the guidelines provided by the department.
Okay. I'm jumping around a little bit here because there's some really good questions that I think are good. Deepka asks, will the elementary kids still have specials, art, music, etc., if they pick remote learning? That also piggybacks on a question from somebody asking in the high school about electives. How will that work?
We are going to try to honor the high school schedules exactly the way students chose them. So if you chose pottery, we're going to try to get you pottery. If you chose, Mandarin 3, you'll get Mandarin 3. But at the elementary level, if you are learning remotely, you will still get your specials very similarly to how you got them last spring. So yes, you'll be meeting with those teachers, via some electronic medium, probably Zoom, and they will be delivering instruction to our kiddos. Yes.
Okay.
It'll be tricky to do some of the specials if you are an in-school person, because we'll probably be pushing those teachers into the classroom so that we're not moving our cohorts all over the buildings.
Right. And speaking of moving cohorts all over the buildings, I was wondering, I had heard some questions before, and one person touched upon this about kids moving around. I have heard some places are considering having kids stay in one room versus moving from room to room. What's the plan for Hopkinton?
Well, I think that the older the kids get, the more movement there sort of is. So in our elementary schools, kids will be staying in their classrooms sort of all day, every day. At Hopkins, that we have switch classes. So there may be some movement of either kids or teachers between those two, which means the cohort gets a little bit larger. It might go from, say, 11 students to 22 students. So you could have a little bit larger cohort there, but that will be the cohort. And then the middle school plans to keep kids, sort of put where they are and move the teachers to them. One of the things that we're looking at with related arts is keeping kids in a related art for a long period of time. So instead of having 4 related arts, for example, in the first trimester, kids might only have 2. And that lessens the exposure of the teachers to the number of students that they are seeing. Like a typical 8th grade teacher might see 110 kids, but a specialist might see, closer to 300 kids. And we're really trying to take that number down for those teachers, right? We're trying to mitigate risk everywhere we possibly can. At the high school level, we are going to have students moving. Mr. Bishop, I think, has created a schedule that has 50% of the kids in school every day, and the movement throughout that building is going to be very nicely orchestrated. There's an ample amount of time to move kids sort of slowly and methodically around the building.
Okay. Would school start times remain the same?
Same. Yes.
Okay. This is a real quick one while I'm got another one. My children are allergic to sanitizer. What is that solution there at the high school?
then we will let that student wash their hands with soap and water whenever that student would like to. And, that may mean that, in between classes, you just scoot into the bathroom, wash your hands, soap and water. There'll be a paper towel dispenser in there. And all should be right with the world. So no student is going to ever be compelled to use hand sanitizer. It's just there for the kids who think, I'm not going to go and wash my hands yet again. I just did that an hour ago.
Okay. Maureen said, great job communicating outward to families throughout this process. So congratulations on that. Carrie asks, if I send my child to school for the hybrid learning and wanted to switch to remote learning, would I have to wait, even if I thought it was unsafe?
I'll just say this, it's a whole lot easier to take a kiddo who is in the hybrid model and kind of move them out to the remote learning model. But that said, it may take some time to sort of facilitate that. We've got to remember that. So say you had a second grader and we have a remote teacher who has 20 kids in the remote model, and they've built a little bit of a community. It might take a couple days, I think, to kind of get us to that place. You know what I mean? It's probably trickier to move somebody in, but that really is something that, we'll be looking at. I would not want a person to feel like they had to come into school if they were feeling that they were unsafe ever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sarah asks, if a student is fully remote, is there opportunity for the student to join the outdoor activities, such as recess?
I think I would have to say no to that one. I think that would just become a little bit chaotic, and it would be hard to know who was responsible for the child on the playground. And, I'm sure that the classroom teacher will be establishing norms, protocols, routines, and then that child from the remote learning environment wouldn't sort of be aware of those things. So,
Okay.
Our playgrounds are typically open when school is not, so they could certainly come after 3 o'clock and use the playground space.
Okay. Jake asks, will the district be able to make a decision independent of the state to go back to full remote if cases increase enough in town to warrant it? And how will a decision be made about that?
We are certainly allowed to do that. The superintendents across the state have actually been asking the Commissioner of Education to kind of set up some parameters around like percentages, for example. So in the event that there are 19,000 citizens in the town of Hopkinton, what happens if there are 100 cases or 250 cases? It would be really nice to kind of have a number, whether they are cases in the community, cases in the school district. But yes, to give a short answer to that question, we are able to shut down a district and move it to remote learning in the event that we would want to do that.
Okay, great. Here is one from Kristen. What is the quarantine protocol if a high schooler is positive? Will all of their classes be quarantining or going remote?
So what the commissioner would tell us about that, and I would really lean on the DPH for that. What the commissioner would tell us is you would have to have been in close contact, defined by 6 feet or less, for greater than 15 minutes. The thinking at the elementary school is that because those kids are in a classroom all day long together, it would really be hard not to have that kind of contact that might take place for, the 15 minutes. At the high school, things would be maybe a little bit different. So I think that we would, take a look at where that student has been, what kinds of classes he's been in, what kind of work they've been doing, with whom that person, may have eaten lunch or traveled in a bus or traveled in a car. And I would absolutely defer to the DPH on that.
Okay. Darlene asks, will there be sports and clubs?
Well, that's a very good question. We've thought about clubs, and there are some clubs that we can absolutely kind of run remotely. Or, maybe there are some clubs that could be run in person if we had the right amount of social distancing. I think that it would be very tricky, and we're trying not to elongate the school day. So I think I would say, as far as clubs go, they would probably have to be run remotely. But as for athletics, we are dependent on the MIAA, and I know that our athletic director in the community, Rich Cormia, has been attending every one of those meetings. And most recently, I believe that they pushed the date back to September 14th, and that date is the date that they say that they would not start before for athletics. So that's as much information as we have right now on athletics.
Okay. Sophia asks, will kids who pick to do remote in the same grade be put in the same classrooms / schedule?
That's very likely. If we say, for example, we had 40 third graders, we would probably create 2 third grade remote classrooms. But if we had, 19 third graders, then the answer to that question would be absolutely yes. Yeah, they will all be together.
Okay. Here's an interesting one from Anne. Will there be increased rigor and accountability for elementary specials compared to the spring experience?
I'm always reluctant to use the term rigor, but I do think that we are really considering the difference between what we put out in the spring and what we intend to put out remotely, for what could ostensibly be an entire school year. So I guess my answer to that is we are currently working with the Teachers Association to really think about what teaching and learning is going to look like next year. We have professional development planned to talk about the ways in which remote instruction can be maximized. So what does that really valuable time that you have look like when you are face to face with a teacher? And what are the things that kids can do on their own independently that don't sort of require the teacher to facilitate discussion or be explicitly teaching some, really, I guess, granular kind of thing that would be difficult to understand either in writing or through, a webinar, for example. Maybe sometimes kids have messed around with math problems and we're going to ask, the kids to come in and have really good conversations with us, sometimes small group, sometimes whole group, so that we're getting much better at delivery of remote instruction. And I would say that will apply to specials as well, to answer her question.
Okay. Kirthi asked, does Marathon offer remote for pre-K?
Our intention is to bring back pre-K full-time in person. Pre-K, as you know, is a combination of special education students and their typical peers. And those class sizes are currently so small that we could bring back pre-K full-time every day.
Okay. Quick one about bus transportation. If we already have paid for bus transportation but no longer want our kids to ride the bus, Monica asks, can we get a refund?
Absolutely. Contact someone in our transportation department and we will get you a refund.
Okay. Some people have been asking, going back to safety in the schools, if you're doing anything in particular about HVAC, including like filters or any fans or anything like that that you're considering.
Sure. The Hopkinton Public Schools, I would say, are luckier than most. And what I mean by that is, there are some school districts who will say, we are postponing HVAC work again this year because we need to buy math textbooks. That has not been the case in the Hopkinton Public Schools. In the last 2 years, we have invested, $60,000, for example, in all of the HVAC exhaust fans that are on the roofs in the Hopkinton Public Schools. I have been working very closely with our director of building and grounds. He's brought in an HVAC company, as we do sort of every year, to service our HVAC, take a look at it before school starts. One of the things that is important to know is we do not sort of refilter air that's inside. So let's imagine for a moment that we have, a classroom and kids have been in that classroom for an hour's time. It's not as if that air is sort of just stagnant air that has been in there that keeps getting recycled over and over again. Our univents or any of our HVAC systems, we don't have univents in every building, but what they do, 201, is they pull fresh air from the outside and they run it through a filter. And so while it's, pushing fresh air in all of the time, what's really nice about that is it's fresh air replacing the air that's in there. As we know, the problem with the coronavirus largely is that aerosolization that comes out of people's mouths when they talk, right? So, or sneeze or cough. And so what we want to do is sort of mitigate the amount of aerosol in the air. That's what's actually helping us in our classrooms. We have fresh air all the time just being pushed in and pushed in. We've, had some conversations with folks about this, and people are asking, can you turn those, vent systems and HVAC systems on an hour before kids come in? Absolutely. Can you run them, a couple hours after they leave and then go in and sanitize the rooms? Absolutely. There are questions now, and we've even been doing sort of all kinds of research about, does it make sense to have fans blowing fresh air in and then other fans that are taking the some air out, kind of creating some kind of, so we're thinking about that as well. But to be really honest with you, I would say we are a district whose HVAC is in incredibly good shape, even in the years. So let's turn the clock back for a moment. Even in the years when we were in center school and we would have air quality tests done, we always passed. And I will be very honest with you, like, if a school was going to fail somewhere, I would have thought center school would, but it did not. So that was really comforting.
Great. All right. Jenica asks, will the hybrid models be synchronized so that remote and in-person students learn the same material at the same time? If not, how do students learn a year's worth of curriculum if they only attend half the year?
Well, if you have a child who is in the K-5 realm, one of the things that we did even in the spring, and at this point in time, I would like to kind of give a shout out to the 3 elementary principals, Mrs. DeBow, Mrs. Carver, and Mrs. Bilello, and also to our ELA coordinator, Deb Moriarty, and our assistant superintendent, Jennifer Parson. What they set up in the spring was amazing. We had the exact same lessons going out over all of these classrooms that involved things like Foundations, which is a phonics and phonemic awareness program, the instructional read alouds that had gone out, or, any of the texts that went out. They were even the same books for our second graders and third graders. And people thought, how can you do that? Use the same books. But what we were doing is using the same text, but teaching different standards and skills. So there was a uniformity that was, at least to me, kind of refreshing, in the sense that we were sure that our kids were getting kind of a very consistent product. So, and I would just say that if your kids are aged in 6 to 12, we have our teachers at the high school, we call them course partners. So if your kid is in chemistry, for example, what one chemistry teacher is teaching is typically what the other chemistry teacher is teaching. Grade 7, what a pre-algebra teacher might be teaching is what our pre-algebra teachers are teaching. We always give our teachers sort of the flexibility to deliver things using their own kind of style and personality and that, but the curriculum that goes out should be the same.
Okay. I have more questions than we could possibly answer in the remaining 3 minutes of this show, but I'd like to end on this one because I think our school system is a really kind and thoughtful school system. Catherine asks, how is fear and anxiety of the students who watch the news and follow the science going to be alleviated? How is a student's mental state being addressed for students when they return to a new normal?
That's a really wonderful question. And I guess I'm actually thrilled that the Commissioner of Education has given us those additional 10 days. So even if the students aren't coming to school, we have 10 days of professional work with our teachers before the kids ever walk through the door. And to be honest, because we have 2 of our own days that he hadn't given to us, we have 12. And how we'll sort of use them, maybe we'll only use 10 of them. We haven't made that decision yet. But we are going to bring in people who are going to train our teachers, the teachers sort of superficially in that kind of social emotional realm. But we also in our schools have school adjustment counselors. We have enough guidance counselors, BCBAs. We have a load of, staff that are really, really good at working with our kids. One thing I would ask parents to do is, if you feel like your child is really stressed because of, their kind of fears, anxiety, angst, whatever it is that they're having in terms of being with their peers in close quarters, because they probably haven't been in some time. I hope that those parents will reach out to let us know that that's taking place. The Algebra 1 teacher isn't credentialed to, be able to provide that kind of therapy to a kid, but also the Algebra 1 teacher may never know that's how that student is feeling. So if parents let us know, we can certainly get those students to our psychologists, school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, BCBAs, the people who, may need to work very closely with those students. So please don't hesitate to reach out if a kiddo needs us.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. I just want to let our viewers know I've got about a dozen, maybe 15 more questions that we were unable to get to in this time. I have them all. I will be sharing them with our superintendent so that she will know other thoughts and concerns that are happening in our community. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Carol.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate, the opportunity to get information out, and I am very excited for the start of the school year. It will be different, but it will be wonderful.
All right. I'll see you next week at the same time.
Same time. See you then.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Goodbye, everyone.